Hi, my name is Olivia. The first time my mother called me a failure, it wasn't in anger. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was worse. It was calm, quiet, like stating the weather. Maybe you're just not built for big things, she had said, folding laundry while looking straight through me. I stood in the doorway, the weight of rejection heavier than any suitcase I dragged through city subways. She didn't mean to hurt me, but that didn't mean it didn't cut. And the worst part? I believed her. 2 years before Times Square, I lived in a 400-square-foot apartment that smelled like burnt toast and industrial paint. My window didn't open fully, and sometimes I'd hold my breath walking past the hallway trash chute. Rent ate most of my paycheck, and what was left went into ideas that no one cared about. Apps that didn't get downloads. Products no one ordered. Logos I designed at 3 a.m. under a flickering kitchen light bulb. I'd pitch, post, and push, and still watch the screen stay quiet. No clicks. No sales. No nothing. But I couldn't stop. That was the thing about me. I had no plan B. No fallback. I wasn't a genius or a tech prodigy. I was just relentless. I learned things I didn't understand, sat through webinars I couldn't afford, cold emailed until my Gmail got temporarily locked. I once walked 4 miles just to save bus fare, hoping the meeting would be worth it. It wasn't. He offered me exposure. I smiled, shook his hand, and left with numb feet. My mom called every Sunday, not because she missed me, but because she felt obligated. It was always the same script.
How are you?
Still doing that internet thing. Followed by long sighs and unsolicited job listings. There's a receptionist job opening at your aunt's clinic. It's good money. She never said it outright, but I could feel it through the line. Embarrassment. She told people I was freelancing because entrepreneur sounded too close to unemployed. I didn't blame her. At that point, I hadn't even told her how I'd been eating dollar store pasta for 3 weeks. Still, I kept building. The turning point wasn't loud either. It came in the form of a missed call. Unknown number. 1 voicemail. A startup brand had stumbled on my Instagram reel from 3 months ago, a 17-second clip where I mocked traditional marketing and pitched an imaginary brand called Trash Talk. I had made it as a joke. Apparently, someone found it disruptive. They wanted me to build a real version of it. A real brand. From scratch. They didn't offer equity. They offered a challenge. I didn't even blink. I said yes within minutes. The next 6 months were chaos. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. I worked off 2 monitors, 1 cracked and 1 borrowed. I designed logos, wrote taglines, handled PR pitches, created influencer briefs, coordinated drop schedules, and even shipped the first 200 orders myself, packaged with handwritten notes. I cried in between meetings and ate instant noodles over design drafts. My vision board was a wall of post-its beside the radiator. My team was just me and an overworked laptop. But something strange started to happen. The numbers moved. People started tagging the brand. Influencers posted without being paid. A tweet thread went viral. I watched the analytics like a heartbeat monitor. 3K impressions.
10K, 100K.
It felt surreal. I kept waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. Within 8 months, Trash Talk became more than a joke. It became a brand with a waitlist. Journalists wrote about it as if it had always existed. And suddenly, I was no longer invisible. I was being noticed, but quietly. Quiet emails. Quiet investors. Quiet approvals. And still, I didn't tell my mom. The night before it all changed, I sat on my floor, scrolling through old voicemails. One stood out. Her voice, soft and tired, asking if I was okay. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," she had said. But that's what she never understood. I wasn't trying to prove something to the world. I was trying to prove something to myself. That I was more than the girl who almost settled. The email came at 2:41 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Subject line. Confirmed. Times Square Billboard slot secured. I stared at it for a full minute. I had pitched the idea weeks ago to a PR firm, half as a joke. If we're going to talk trash, I had written, let's do it big. They replied with a sponsorship match and a budget I still don't understand. I blinked at the screen. My design, my tagline, was about to go live on a 75-foot LED screen above the city I once felt invisible in. I didn't sleep that night. The morning of the reveal, I didn't wear anything special. Just jeans and a jacket that still smelled like paint thinner. I didn't bring friends or photographers. I didn't go to document it. I went to feel it. The billboard flashed on at exactly 10:02 a.m. I stood across the street, surrounded by tourists, most of whom didn't even glance up. But I saw it. My work. My words. My name, small but there, printed in the lower corner, like a quiet stamp. It was surreal. And oddly peaceful. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, took one photo. Not for social media.
Just for me.
Then I called my mom. She didn't pick up the first time. Or the second. On the third ring, she answered. I didn't say anything at first.
Just sent her the photo.
It took a few seconds. Then I heard it, the soft inhale, the moment of pause. Is this real? She finally asked. I told her yes. That it had been real for a while now. There was silence. The kind that sits heavy in your throat. Then she said it, almost too quiet to catch. I'm proud of you. For a second, I thought I misheard her. My mom didn't do praise. She did reminders, warnings, guilt trips. But there it was.
Soft. Honest.
Almost broken.
She didn't ask how.
She didn't ask for details. She just said she was proud. And I cried. Not because I needed her approval, but because I realized I didn't anymore. It was nice, but it wasn't fuel. The real fire had always come from somewhere else. From the nights I failed and showed up again. From the mornings I had nothing and still created something. From the day I was called a failure and chose to keep going anyway. But I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Because success has a strange way of stirring shadows. And in the weeks after the billboard, things I thought were buried began to rise again. Old connections, forgotten contracts, promises made in desperation. I was about to learn something no one warns you about. Success doesn't protect you. It exposes you. And the people clapping the loudest aren't always on your side. The flood came quietly at first, disguised as praise. Emails rolled in like high tides. Brands asking for collabs, consultants asking to grab coffee, and people I hadn't heard from since college suddenly claiming they always believed in me. I smiled through it. I wasn't bitter. I knew the game. But something in me had shifted since Times Square. I wasn't hungry for validation anymore. I was hunting for something else, stability, legacy, maybe peace, maybe even silence. But peace doesn't sell. And silence rarely lasts. It started with a package. No return address, wrapped too neatly. Inside, an old sketchbook of mine from college. My real name was on the cover, something no one in the press even knew. There was no note. Just the book. And one page bookmarked with a small paperclip, a brand concept I had abandoned 6 years ago. Something I had once pitched to a mentor, who ghosted me. Now, that exact design, down to the tagline, had been used by a new company raising millions. A company that launched a week ago. A company owned by that mentor. I didn't panic. I researched. I found his name on the founding documents, scrubbed clean of any collaboration credit. I dug through my emails from back then. Found one with the same prototype attached. Unopened. Dated and traceable. I had evidence. But something told me this wasn't just theft. It was a warning. That sketchbook wasn't returned to honor me. It was bait. Someone knew I'd notice.
Someone wanted me to.
Still, I kept working. Trash talk had taken on a life of its own. I finally hired help, 2 interns and a part-time fulfillment assistant. I rented a small co-working studio with plants that I kept forgetting to water. The orders didn't stop. The DMs kept coming. The problem was I didn't feel like I was building anymore. I was defending. The second twist came faster. My payment processor froze the account. No warning. No notice. Just a polite email saying unusual activity had been detected. I had 34 unfulfilled orders and no access to funds. I tried calling. They kept forwarding me to compliance. I sat on hold for 2 hours, eyes locked on a spreadsheet of customers I couldn't serve. Then a friend forwarded me a Reddit thread. Someone had posted anonymously claiming Trash Talk was ripping off designs and had no real ownership over their concept. A few upvotes. A screenshot of my old sketchbook page. It was planted. I knew it. And still it worked. In the next 48 hours, 2 collaborations pulled out. A PR contact ghosted. One of the interns didn't show up. My mom called that night. She didn't ask about business. She just asked if I was eating. I lied and said yes. The truth was I hadn't eaten in 17 hours. My stomach felt like knots tied around bricks. I stayed up all night, scanning receipts, downloading files, writing down names I remembered from every pitch, every bad handshake, every NDAs signed under cheap lighting. That old mentor had contacts. He'd once joked that he could make or break anyone in 3 phone calls or less. I was beginning to believe it. Then I got a text from a number I didn't save. 1 sentence. "You're not the only one he buried." At first, I thought it was spam. But there was a link, private Google Drive access, shared anonymously. Against every instinct, I clicked it. Inside were 6 folders, each one with a woman's name. Each one had decks, voice memos, creative prototypes. All dated. All stolen. All launched later by his firms under different names, with different faces at the helm. It was a pattern. It was systemic. And I wasn't the first. I was just the first one loud enough to make a billboard out of it. I sat there frozen, watching file after file open. One folder even had legal letters, threats sent to one of the women when she tried to sue. She'd backed down. Disappeared. I tried to find her online. Her LinkedIn profile had been deactivated. I forwarded the files to myself. All of them. Then deleted the text, but I knew that was pointless. I had already been seen. The next morning, a cease and desist letter showed up at my apartment. From a new law firm. My name was spelled wrong on the envelope, but the tone was clear. Cease all defamatory messaging against Mr. C******* and associated entities, or face litigation. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because fear had finally run out of room. I had proof. And more than that, I had nothing left to lose. I called a lawyer. A real one this time. Not a friend of a friend or someone who owed me a favor. I paid her retainer with my last accessible business card. She listened, asked 3 questions, and then said something that caught me off guard. "You have enough to not just defend yourself, but to bury him. The question is, do you want to?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of my mom again. Of how she used to say, "Don't pick fights you don't need to win." But this wasn't a fight I picked. It was one that followed me, like a shadow with teeth. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight him. I was going to expose him. But on my terms. I started writing again. Not tweets. Not captions. But a document, 1 page, then 10, then 30. A manifesto, a story, a timeline of theft dressed in professionalism. I didn't release it. Not yet. I shared it with 5 people I trusted. One of them was a journalist. Another was a founder who had once whispered, "I don't think we're supposed to succeed like this." By week's end, I was being invited to panels, not because I was popular, but because I was suddenly dangerous. People love a rebel until she starts making sense. And I was starting to make too much sense. Then came the third twist. The billboard came down. Not because the contract ended. Because the sponsoring brand pulled their partnership, citing unforeseen public controversies. They had been contacted. I don't know who told them what, but it worked. The space was replaced by a perfume ad. And yet, when I stood there again, looking up at the blank screen, I didn't feel erased. I felt like the fight had moved indoors. This wasn't about visibility anymore. This was about permanence. I walked home that night and passed a bookstore I used to sit outside of. In the window, one book caught my eye. What you build builds you. I smiled. Maybe it was cheesy. Maybe it was fate. But I felt the shift in my bones. This wasn't over. In fact, it hadn't even started yet. The day after the billboard came down, I didn't open my laptop. I didn't post. I didn't pitch. I walked. Miles, maybe. Past coffee shops where I used to write captions no one liked. Past apartment buildings where I once stood outside, holding printouts of brand ideas. It was all still there, same pavement, same cracked sidewalks. But I wasn't. I was something else now. I wasn't sure what yet, but I knew what I wasn't. Disposable. Back at the studio, the interns had cleaned up, assuming I wouldn't be back. One even left a note that said it was fun while it lasted. I didn't feel sad. I felt confirmed. This wasn't about who stayed with me when I had success. It was about who believed in the work when it wasn't shiny. I sat down at my desk, opened the file I called evidence_archive. And I started building again, but this time, I wasn't designing a brand. I was building a case. The anonymous Google Drive was just the start. I pieced together timelines, pulled receipts, recorded everything. I found screenshots from pitches I'd sent to that mentor, even audio from a Zoom call I'd saved by accident during a screen test. His voice, calm and fake polite, promising collaboration when the time was right. What he really meant was, "I'll wait until you're too small to fight me." But I wasn't small anymore. Not because of Times Square.
Because of what I knew now.
The real twist came on a Tuesday. I got an email from someone named Renee. Subject line: "We need to talk." He did it to me too. She was a creative director who had once been praised for her bold reinvention of corporate branding. Except she hadn't invented it. She said he stole her IP from a think tank she worked for under NDA. When she threatened to go public, he offered her a job title and no actual power. She quit within months. Asked her why she was reaching out now. She said, "Because you didn't stay quiet. And because I want my name back." That broke something open. I realized this wasn't a one-person war anymore. It wasn't just about my brand, my billboard, or my mom's voice in the back of my head calling me too sensitive. It was about every builder who got pushed out once the structure was stable. Every girl who was told to pitch quietly so someone else could present loudly. We formed a thread. Literally. An encrypted group chat. 6 of us at first. Then 9. Then more. Some came with screenshots. Others with receipts. One girl had a voice memo from a meeting where he laughed and said, "They build, I brand. That's how this works." It wasn't theft.
It was a system.
But calling it out meant exposure. We all knew that. If we went public, they'd bury us in legal complications and whisper campaigns. We needed something stronger than accusation. We needed undeniable proof. And I had it. The contracts. The dates. The files. Even a phone call I'd recorded where his assistant confirmed that my prototype had been the baseline inspiration for their new campaign. At the time, I saved it out of frustration. Now it was a weapon. So we made a plan. Not a tweet. Not a thread. Not a hashtag. A drop. A single digital document. A branded white paper, clean, sourced, cited. Each contributor listed under a pseudonym unless otherwise requested. Evidence presented with receipts. Links embedded. Timelines cross-verified. No bitterness. No drama. Just facts. We called it the Founder's File. It was more than a document. It was a mirror. The day we uploaded it, we didn't tell anyone. We sent it to 5 key journalists. Anonymous tips. Then we waited. Within 12 hours, 1 article went live. Then 2. By the next morning, the Founder's File was trending on X, Reddit, even LinkedIn. People started sharing their own stories in the comments. Creatives from different cities, agencies, even countries. It hit a nerve. And when it reached critical mass, something unexpected happened. The investor pulled out. Not from trash talk, from his brand. The one he had stolen from me. They posted a dry statement about reevaluating leadership strategy and internal restructuring. But we knew. The board knew. His time was running out. Then I got the email I never thought I'd receive. Subject line: "We'd like to meet." From board chair at Crescent Capital Partners. Crescent Capital. The people who funded him. The people who were now quietly reaching out to me, not for apology, for negotiation. They asked for Zoom call. No press. Just conversation. I said yes. The call lasted 43 minutes. The chairwoman was polished, diplomatic, and sharp. She didn't mince words. She said the board wanted to transition into a more ethical framework. I told her that sounded like a rebrand, not accountability. She paused. Then she asked what it would take for me to walk away satisfied. I told her I didn't want hush money. I wanted ownership. Not of his company. Of my name. So we made a deal. Not for silence, for structure. They would fund a grant program under my name, run independently, for underrepresented female founders. They would issue a public statement acknowledging historical misconduct within affiliated leadership. They would step down from the campaign they stole from me and issue a full IP credit. And they did. That week, I sat across from my mom at a tiny restaurant in our old neighborhood. She didn't know everything. I hadn't told her about the file, the threats, or the sleepless nights. But she had seen the headlines. She had seen the clip of me speaking on a live stream panel titled, "The Cost of Silence in Creative Spaces." She looked at me, eyes soft. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I was wrong about you." Not an apology, but close enough. I nodded, stirred my tea. Then I smiled and said, "I know." But the story didn't end there. Because a week later, I got a package.
No sender.
Same clean wrap. Inside, another sketchbook. But this one was empty. Except for one line, handwritten across the first page. Success has a strange aftertaste. It's not sweet. It's quiet, heavy, like rain sitting on your skin hours after the storm has passed. The articles had slowed. The applause faded. The messages of support became fewer, quieter. But the pressure didn't fade. It shifted. Success doesn't make you untouchable. It just puts a target on your back in a shinier color. After the founders' file shook the ecosystem, I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt exposed. Like I had burned down a house I'd built just to prove it was mine. Trash talk was still alive, barely. Orders had stabilized. A new sponsorship was brewing. But I didn't care. Because I knew what was coming next. People weren't going to ask how I built it. They were going to ask what I would do now that they were watching. And they were watching. One afternoon, I was sitting in the shared workspace, feet up on a coffee table I had bought secondhand from a studio closing down, when an alert popped on my phone. I thought it was another press mention. It wasn't. It was a direct message on LinkedIn. From her, the co-founder of the Mentors firm. The woman who'd always stayed in the background, rarely on camera, never quoted in articles. She sent me a message just 6 words long. He wasn't the only one stealing. I read it twice. Then again. A part of me didn't want to respond. Another part knew I had to. I asked her to explain. She didn't at first, just sent me a file, one I wasn't expecting. It was my own brand's registration. Trash Talk. Except it wasn't under my name. It was under a shell LLC. A name I didn't recognize, dated back to the time when I had been too broke to file it myself and paid an online service to handle it for me. I clicked through the documents, my hand starting to shake. The original registrant? A firm I'd worked with briefly for marketing automation. One I had signed a standard consulting contract with. They had filed the brand under their name. Silently.
Strategically.
Then waited until it became valuable. I was stunned. And furious. All this time, I'd been defending my brand, protecting its growth, unaware that legally, on paper, I didn't even own it. They hadn't said a word, not during the file drop, not when I went viral, not when the Billboard went up. They'd just waited. It hit me like a delayed punch. The mentor I had exposed wasn't the end of the enemy list. He was just the distraction. The real play was bigger. And quieter. I called my lawyer. She paused as I explained everything. Then she asked me the worst question possible. Did you sign over brand rights in any of your early contracts? I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, I didn't know. Back then, I'd sign anything that made me feel like I was progressing. I was hungry, tired, desperate to get noticed. I'd assumed the people I paid were working for me. Now I wasn't so sure. My lawyer dug in.
So did I.
We read contracts line by line, clause by clause. And there it was, buried on page 12, section 5.2 of a services agreement I'd signed at 1:17 a.m. over microwave mac and cheese. Any derivative brand, logo, slogan, or entity created under the services provided shall be co-owned by the firm and client unless otherwise revised in writing. I wanted to scream. That clause was like a ticking bomb I had carried in my pocket for 2 years without knowing it. We had a problem. Not a PR problem. A real one. If they decided to challenge me publicly, they had a legal path. If I fought them, I risked everything. The brand. The audience. The income. Even my credibility. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened that empty sketchbook, the one I'd received with the note. Now that they know your name, what will you build next? And that's when the idea hit me. Maybe I couldn't save Trash Talk. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe this wasn't the end of a brand. Maybe this was the beginning of a legacy. I spent the next 2 days off-grid. I turned off my notifications. I shut the studio. I went back to where it all started, the tiny corner of my old neighborhood library. Same cracked table. Same sun through the dusty windows. And I started building again. But this time, with everything I had learned.
No shortcuts.
No silent partners.
No borrowed platforms.
This wasn't going to be a brand that lived in reactions and likes. This was going to be a platform, an ecosystem. One built around creators who had been erased, manipulated, or undercredited. A place where ownership wasn't negotiable, it was foundational. I called it Second Draft. Because that's what we all were. The ones who weren't picked the first time. The ones who got edited out. The ones told we were too much, too loud, too complicated, too niche. The ones who deserved a second shot, but this time, with full control. My lawyer helped me file the paperwork correctly. I launched it in silence. No press. No launch event.
No viral stand.
Just a simple landing page. We are the founders you forgot to credit. The inbox filled within hours. Women. Queer founders.
Immigrants.
Survivors. Creatives who had stories that didn't fit in pitch decks. They sent ideas, portfolios, unfinished drafts. All of them saying the same thing. I didn't think anyone would care. I did. Because I had been them. Trash Talk started fading. I let it. I didn't fight to hold on. I redirected traffic to the new site. Gave away the remaining inventory. Rebranded the socials. A few people said I was giving up. But I knew better. I wasn't giving up. I was trading up. Because when you're a builder at your core, you don't mourn what falls. You use it to build better. Weeks passed. Then months. Second Draft started trending, not as a moment, but as a movement. Then came the moment I didn't expect. I was invited to speak at a private VC summit. The invite came with a single sentence. We're listening now. I wore the same jacket I had worn when I pitched Trash Talk at midnight via Zoom. I stood on that stage and looked out at the people who once told me my idea was too messy, too angry, too unmarketable. And I told them exactly what I had learned. Not just about branding, but about theft and resilience. And how the most powerful creators are the ones no one saw coming. When I finished, no one clapped right away. They just sat there. Still. Like they had just seen something they couldn't unsee. Then the applause started. It didn't roar. It rose. Slowly. Powerfully. From the back to the front. And I knew. This wasn't a comeback. This was a correction. The final twist didn't come with headlines. It didn't flash in Times Square or break the internet. It came in an envelope, plain and white, slipped under my apartment door like a ghost. I found it one morning, sealed with a logo I hadn't seen in months, the law firm that had once sent me a cease and desist. My stomach dropped. My hands didn't shake this time. I opened it slowly, like peeling back the end of a story I wasn't sure I wanted to read. Inside was a letter. Just one page. No threats. No posturing. A settlement offer. The firm that had quietly registered trash talk under their name had reviewed their internal practices following public attention. They offered me the full rights to the brand, transferred in writing with legal documentation. No strings. No fines. No signatures required. Just a line at the bottom. We regret the confusion and appreciate your past collaboration. It should have felt like victory. But it didn't. Because by the time they returned what they stole, I didn't need it anymore. I had already built something better. I stared at the letter for a while. Then I folded it, slid it into a drawer, and never touched it again. Because here's the thing people don't tell you about winning. Sometimes the real win is learning how to walk away without bitterness. Second Draft was no longer an idea. It was real. It had grown faster than anything I'd built before. Founders from 4 different countries had submitted applications. We launched a pilot incubator that paired creators with mentors who weren't there to take, only to guide. I hired a team, diverse, empathetic, loud when necessary, and quiet when it mattered. We didn't promise funding. We promised freedom. And that was rarer. Meanwhile, my story, this strange, winding, blistered path, kept circulating in places I never thought it would reach. Podcasts, panels, books I hadn't read. A documentary producer emailed me asking if I'd consider letting them adapt the story for screen. I laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because I remembered sitting in a laundromat 2 years ago, crying into a cold coffee while designing a logo no one would ever see. My mother watched all of it unfold from a distance. She didn't call often, but when she did, her tone was different now.
Softer.
Curious. One day, I asked her why she never visited the studio. She went quiet for a moment, then said, "I didn't think I'd understand what you've built, but I'm starting to." And then she did something unexpected.
She came.
Unannounced. Just walked in during one of our team meetings. She stood awkwardly by the door, wearing the same purse she's had since I was 15. Someone offered her a chair. She waved them off and just looked around.
Slowly.
Taking it all in. The whiteboard cluttered with ideas. The wall filled with photos of contributors from around the world. The little shelf where I kept my original Trash Talk prototype, now just a souvenir of a chapter one no longer needed. And then she looked at me. "I get it now," she said. I didn't ask what part. She just got it. And sometimes that's enough. But closure comes in strange ways. A few weeks later, I received another letter. This one handwritten. The mentor. The one who started this entire firestorm. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement. It was a list. A typed sheet detailing the projects he had worked on, many of which mirrored stolen concepts. He claimed he wanted to set the record straight. I didn't reply, because that letter wasn't about truth. It was about redemption. And that wasn't mine to give. The day we launched Second Draft's first public campaign, I didn't wear anything special. I didn't prepare a speech. I just walked out to the middle of our little rented studio, gathered the team, and hit publish. Within 2 hours, our story was featured on the front page of Tech Weekly. Not because it was the most funded, but because it was different. The title read, Second Draft, the platform built by the erased, for the builders who stayed. We didn't trend. We didn't go viral. But the applications tripled in a week. That night, I went home to the same small apartment where it had all begun. I sat on the floor, opened my old journal, and flipped to a page I hadn't touched in years. The entry read, "Maybe I'm just not built for big things." I crossed it out, then wrote underneath, "Or maybe big things weren't built for me." So I built my own. And then I closed the book. A few days later, I flew to New York for a speaking event. It wasn't glamorous. It was a gathering of independent creators, people like me, with broken pasts and unfinished dreams. The room was packed. They asked me how I stayed sane, how I handled betrayal, how I survived all of it. I told them the truth. I said, "You don't survive this. You grow into it. You burn, then you bloom. You build with ash on your hands." And they understood. As I left the building, I passed through Times Square again. The screens blinked with advertisements for brands I used to chase. But I didn't look up. I didn't need to. Because this time, the win wasn't in the spotlight. It was in the shadow I no longer feared. The real victory wasn't getting my face on a billboard. It was building something that couldn't be taken down with a phone call. Something that couldn't be erased. Something that outlived applause. When I got home, there was a message on my phone. It was from one of the women in the second draft program. Her voice cracked with emotion as she said, "You changed my life. I thought I was invisible, but now I know I'm just getting started." I smiled, because maybe that's the point. It's not about proving your mother wrong. It's about becoming the kind of woman who no longer needs to.